There's so many amazing things we can do in the garden in shade. Today we're going to discuss the plants as well as what you need to know to be successful in your own garden. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned as we garden smart in Georgia. Most gardens that we visit have a balance of sun and shade environments which allow them to show off a wide variety of plants that will perform well in that region. While shade can seem to provide certain gardening challenges, there are thousands of plants that love the shade and thrive there. Many of the most exciting new selections available on the market are designed for shade and are introducing a new and amazing range of foliage colors and showy flowers. We're going to spend the day strolling through a series of different shade gardens, discussing plant selections and their care. We'll be joined by renowned horticulturalist Jim Gibbs, who will be sharing with us a lifetime of learning and knowledge about shade gardening. Jim broke ground on Gibbs Gardens almost 40 years ago and has been the primary canvas of his incredible creativity. His woodland gardens are world-class and provide an amazing opportunity to explore the ever-changing world of gardening in the shade. Jim, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Jim, today we're going to tackle the topic of shade gardening and hopefully show our viewers that there's so many amazing options and there's a lot that we can do. So we don't have to give up on wonderful color, great structure in the garden just because we're in the shade. Let's start from the top down. I want to talk about trees and shrubs that you really like to perform well in the shade.
Well, of course, if we're talking about from the top down, if you're in an area like we are in, we've got big oaks in here that are limbed up. They'll allow some dapple light to come in. You've got hickories that are limbed up high. Then when you come under that, you go to the understory trees such as the dogwoods. You've got the Cornus florida and the Cornus kousa. Both one blooms earlier, one blooms later. So you've got the flowers on those. You've got great fall color with both of those. Those are understory trees. Don't forget the Japanese maples. We have hundreds of varieties of Japanese maples all through the gardens at Gibbs Gardens. So we use a lot of Japanese maples. And then when you come on down to the next level, you're usually thinking about more, I do anyway, I think about evergreens like big rhododendrons that will give you some really dark green foliage and wonderful flowers, hybrid rhododendrons, all colors. You've got mountain laurel with the spring blooms, and you've got evergreen foliage. You've got in there things like the leucothys, the populifolia leucothys. You've got the anise, which is great, which can grow tall, and you've got the fragrance from the anise. So there are a lot of evergreens to think about as we work our way down. Now we're more into the ornamental shrubs like deciduous, and we're in a hydrangea garden.
Right.
So we've got rhododendron and hydrangea, and they work well because one's deciduous and one's evergreen.
One thing also to bear in mind as we're talking through all these plants, that as gardeners, and especially as we're looking at a new environment, if shade is something we're not familiar with, doing some research, getting some good books, talking to the professionals at a retail garden center.
Educate yourself. Look at the books. The books are always divided into three areas: a shade area for shade gardeners, sun for sun gardeners, semi-shade and sun for those. Now once you get into that particular area, the shade gardens, you're going to cut your list down tremendously. So then you start from there. But I think what you're saying is more of an educational process is needed for dealing with the shade. And don't forget, you can Google any plants. And if you want a shade plant that has yellow flowers, it will tell you. If you want one with blue flowers or pink flowers, just Google what you want, but always mention shade plants.
Let's move on to some perennials, and there's some amazing perennials for shade now. I think of like the heuchera and the tiarellas, you know, things like that, that now are introducing with these new selections incredible color, foliage, and blooms.
Those you just mentioned are at the top of my list. I love all those plants. Then you can add to that, of course, ferns look great with the plants you mentioned, with the heucheras. You've got also hostas with the big bowl leaves, and you've got the Hosta Saboliana elegans. It's got that blue-green huge leaf, big white spiky flower. Mixed with the ferns works out great. So we can always add to that the epimediums, which have a heart-shaped leaf. You've got the bleeding hearts, Dicentra, which has a heart-shaped flower that's beautiful. You've got the arching, graceful look of the Solomon seal, and I like the white edge in the shade because that with the white flowers looks well. So there are lots of plants, and again, once you do a little research, come up with your list, and remember, color and texture work well not only in the sun, but in the shade. So always think about your greens, light greens, medium greens, and dark greens, and how they work well together.